It was a Tuesday morning, and 14-year-old Jake was running late for his math class. The hallways of Lincoln Middle School were packed with students rushing between classes, lockers slamming shut, and the usual chaos of a school day in full swing. Jake weaved through the crowd, his backpack bouncing against his shoulder when he heard something that made his blood run cold. Laughter, but not the good kind. The cruel, mocking kind that every kid recognizes instantly. He stopped in his tracks and turned toward the sound. His heart sank when he saw what was happening at the end of the hallway, near the water fountains. 3 older boys had formed a semicircle around someone in a wheelchair. His 12-year-old sister, Lily. Jake's stomach twisted. This wasn't the first time, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. Lily had cerebral palsy, which meant she had trouble controlling her movements, and her speech was sometimes hard to understand. She was one of the smartest kids Jake knew, but some people only saw her wheelchair and heard her different way of speaking. He started walking toward them, his hands already balling into fists. As he got closer, he could hear what they were saying. "Why do you talk like that? Can't you just talk normal?" one of the boys said, leaning down with a fake, concerned expression on his face. His 2 friends snickered behind him. Lily's face was red. Jake could see her trying to form words, but when she got upset or nervous, it became even harder for her to speak clearly. She managed to say something that sounded like, "Leave me alone," but her words came out jumbled. "What? I can't understand you," the tallest boy said, cupping his hand behind his ear in an exaggerated gesture. "Speak up!" The other 2 burst out laughing. One of them started making nonsense sounds, apparently trying to imitate Lily. Jake felt rage building in his chest like a wave about to crash. He walked faster. "Hey!" he shouted, but the boys were too busy with their cruel game to notice him. Then the worst thing happened. The tall boy, apparently bored with just words, reached out and gave Lily's wheelchair a hard kick. The chair rolled backward, and Lily let out a frightened cry. Her hands gripped the armrests, her eyes wide with fear. Something snapped inside Jake. He didn't think. He just acted. He ran the last few steps and shoved the tall boy as hard as he could. The bully stumbled backward, completely caught off guard, and crashed into the lockers with a loud bang that echoed through the hallway. The metal doors rattled from the impact. "Don't you ever touch my sister again," Jake yelled, his voice shaking with anger. The hallway went quiet. Students who had been walking past stopped to watch. Some pulled out their phones. The tall boy pushed himself off the lockers, his face twisted with anger and embarrassment. "You're dead," he said, taking a step toward Jake. But before anything else could happen, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "What is going on here?" Mrs. Patterson, the vice principal, was speed-walking down the hall, her heels clicking rapidly against the floor. Behind her was Mr. Rodriguez, one of the PE teachers. Both of them looked furious. The 3 bullies immediately changed their expressions. The tall one even had the nerve to rub his shoulder like he was seriously hurt. "He attacked me," the boy said, pointing at Jake. "I was just walking by and he pushed me into the lockers for no reason." "That's not true," Jake protested. "They were bullying my sister." "He kicked her wheelchair." Mrs. Patterson held up her hand. "Enough. I don't want to hear it right now." She turned to Mr. Rodriguez. "Take Jake to the office. I'll deal with these 3. Jake's mouth fell open. "But I was just protecting her." "They were office now." Mrs. Patterson's voice left no room for argument. Jake looked at Lily, who had tears streaming down her face. She was trying to say something, gesturing frantically at the 3 boys, but in her distressed state, her words weren't coming out clearly. Mrs. Patterson seemed to barely glance at her before turning back to the bullies. Mr. Rodriguez put a hand on Jake's shoulder. "Let's go, son." As Jake was led away, he looked back to see the 3 boys already walking off in the opposite direction with Mrs. Patterson. They weren't being taken to the office. They were just getting talked to in the hallway. The unfairness of it all made Jake want to scream. In the office, he sat in the chair outside Principal Henderson's door, his leg bouncing nervously. Other students walked past, some whispering and pointing at him. Great. Now everyone would think he was some kind of troublemaker. The office secretary, Mrs. Chen, kept glancing at him with a mixture of pity and disappointment. She'd always been nice to him before. He'd never been sent to the office in his entire school career. Not once. After what felt like forever, the principal's door opened. Principal Henderson stood there, a tall man with graying hair and glasses that made him look stern even when he wasn't trying. "Come in, Jake," he said. Jake walked into the office on shaky legs. Principal Henderson sat behind his big wooden desk and gestured for Jake to sit in the chair across from him. There was a long, uncomfortable silence as the principal looked through some papers on his desk. "Jake," he finally said, looking up, "I've been reviewing your record. You're a good student, good grades, no disciplinary issues involved in the robotics club, so I have to say I'm very disappointed to see you in my office under these circumstances. Mr. Henderson, I can explain." The principal held up his hand, just like Mrs. Patterson had done. "I've already spoken with the other boys involved. They told me you attacked one of them unprovoked. That's not what happened," Jake said, his voice rising. "They were bullying my sister."
"One of them kicked her wheelchair."
"I was just trying to protect her." Principal Henderson leaned back in his chair. "Were there any other witnesses who can confirm that?" There were tons of kids in the hallway, and Lily saw everything because it was happening to her. "I'll be speaking with your sister, of course," the principal said. "But Jake, even if what you're saying is true, you understand that we have a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to physical violence, don't you?" Jake stared at him. "So I was just supposed to let them hurt my sister?" "You were supposed to get a teacher," Principal Henderson said firmly. "That's what you're supposed to do in these situations. You don't take matters into your own hands. But by the time I found a teacher, they could have—" "Jake." The principal's voice was sharp now. "There is no excuse for physical violence in this school, none. I don't care what the circumstances are. We have policies in place for a reason." Jake felt like he was in some kind of nightmare. How was he the one in trouble? He'd been protecting his sister from bullies who were physically threatening her. Wasn't that what any decent person would do? "What about those 3 boys?" Jake asked. "Are they getting in trouble for bullying Lily?" Principal Henderson shuffled his papers. "I'll be looking into that. But right now, we're talking about your behavior. You put your hands on another student and pushed him violently into the lockers. That's assault, Jake. In the real world, people go to jail for that." The word assault hung in the air like a dark cloud. Jake felt sick to his stomach. "I'm suspending you for 5 days," Principal Henderson continued. "And I'm warning you right now, if there is even one more incident like this, you will be expelled. Do you understand me?" Jake couldn't speak. He just nodded, feeling numb. "Your parents are being called right now. You'll wait in the office until they arrive to pick you up." As Jake walked out of the principal's office, he felt like the whole world had turned upside down. He'd done the right thing. He knew he had. But somehow he was the one being punished while the real bullies got to walk away. Jake sat in the plastic chair outside the main office, watching the clock on the wall tick by slowly. Each minute felt like an hour. His mind kept replaying the scene in the hallway over and over again. The sound of his sister's frightened cry, the kick to her wheelchair, the look on those boys' faces when they laughed at her. He didn't regret pushing that bully. Not even a little bit, but the weight of what was happening was starting to sink in. Suspended, 5 days, and the threat of expulsion hanging over his head like a sword. His parents were going to be devastated. The office door swung open, and Jake looked up to see his mom rushing in, still wearing her hospital scrubs from work. She was a nurse at the county hospital and must have left in the middle of her shift. His dad followed close behind in his work uniform from the auto shop, grease still on his hands. "Jake." His mom's face was a mixture of worry and confusion. She hurried over and put her hands on his shoulders, looking him up and down like she was checking for injuries. "Are you okay? What happened?" Before he could answer, Principal Henderson appeared at his office door. "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, thank you for coming so quickly. Please come in." Jake's parents exchanged a glance. His mom squeezed his shoulder. "We'll figure this out, sweetie." They disappeared into the principal's office and the door closed behind them. Jake strained to hear what was being said, but the voices were too muffled. All he could make out were occasional raised tones from his dad. 20 minutes later, the door opened again. Jake's dad looked furious, his face red and his jaw clenched. His mom looked like she'd been crying. Neither of those things was a good sign. "Let's go," his dad said quietly. They walked out of the school in silence. Jake noticed some students watching from the windows. Perfect. Everyone would be talking about this by tomorrow. In the car, nobody spoke for the first few minutes. Finally, Jake couldn't take it anymore. "I'm sorry," he said from the back seat. His dad glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Don't apologize, son. You did what you had to do. Then why do you look so angry?" "I'm not angry at you," his dad said. his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. I'm angry at that principal and his ridiculous policies. His mom turned in her seat to look at him. Tell us exactly what happened, Jake, everything. So he did. He told them about hearing the laughter, seeing the boys surrounding Lily, the cruel things they said, and the kick to her wheelchair. He told them how he'd reacted without thinking and pushed the tall boy into the lockers. Did any teachers see what those boys were doing to Lily? His mom asked. Jake shook his head. Not that I saw, but there were tons of other kids around. They had to have seen it. Principal Henderson says it's your word against theirs, his dad said bitterly. And because you're the one who got physical, you're the one who's being punished. What about those boys? Are they getting in trouble? His mom and dad exchanged another look. They got a verbal warning, his mom said quietly. That's it? A verbal warning? Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. They've been bullying Lily for months, and all they get is a talking to? According to the principal, there's no physical evidence of bullying, his dad said. No videos, no photos, no teachers who witnessed it directly. So his hands are tied, apparently. Jake felt anger rising in his chest again. That's not fair! No, it's not, his dad agreed. But that's the way they're handling it. When they got home, Lily was already there. She'd been brought home earlier by the school counselor. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her wheelchair pulled up close with her tablet in front of her. When she saw Jake, her face crumpled and she started crying. Jake went over and hugged her. It's okay, Lil, I'm okay. She pushed some buttons on her tablet. She used it to help her communicate when speaking was too difficult. The computer voice read out her message. This is my fault. You got in trouble because of me. No, Jake said firmly. This is not your fault. Those boys are the ones who should be in trouble, not you, and definitely not me. Their parents joined them at the table. His mom made tea, which is what she always did when she was stressed. The hot mug sat untouched in front of her as she rubbed her temples. I tried to tell them what happened, his dad said. I tried to explain that you were protecting your sister from bullies who were physically threatening her. Do you know what Principal Henderson said? What? Jake asked. He said that the school has a zero-tolerance policy on physical violence, no exceptions. He said that if they make an exception for you, they'd have to make exceptions for everyone, and then the whole policy falls apart. But that doesn't make any sense, Jake said. Every situation is different. That's what I told him, his dad said. I asked him what he would do if it was his kid in a wheelchair being bullied. You know what he said? He said he'd hope his child would have the sense to find a teacher instead of taking matters into their own hands. Jake's mom made a sound of disgust. The man has no empathy. I asked him about all the times we've reported Lily being bullied. All those emails I've sent. All those phone calls. He barely acknowledged them. Jake looked at Lily. You've been bullied before and they knew about it? Lily nodded and typed on her tablet. Many times. They usually just tell them to stop. But they never really stop. The unfairness of it all was overwhelming. Jake felt like he was going to explode with frustration. So what happens now? He asked. His dad sighed. You're suspended for 5 days starting tomorrow. If there's another incident, any incident, you'll be expelled. And those boys? They get to stay in school with a warning on their record. That's it. The family sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the injustice settling over them like a heavy blanket. We're not just going to accept this, his mom said suddenly. Her voice had that determined edge that Jake recognized. It was the same voice she used when she was advocating for patients at the hospital. This isn't right, and I'm not going to let them sweep this under the rug. What can we do? Jake asked. The principal already made his decision. There are people above the principal, his dad said. The superintendent, the school board, and there's the media, his mom added. This is the kind of story that people need to hear about. A boy gets suspended for defending his disabled sister from bullies? That's not okay. Lily was typing furiously on her tablet. When she finished, the computer voice read, I can tell everyone what really happened. I have friends who will help me. Jake's mom knelt down next to Lily's wheelchair. Honey, you don't have to do that. This isn't your responsibility. But Lily shook her head stubbornly and typed, Jake protected me. Now I protect him. Over the next few hours, Jake's parents made phone calls. They called the superintendent's office and left a message. They called the school board and left another message. They called local news stations and told them what happened. Most of them said they'd look into it. One person at the school board office basically told them that the principal's decision was final, and there was nothing they could do. The news station said they'd consider it. It all felt like running into brick walls. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how everything had gone so wrong so fast. This morning, he'd been a regular student with a clean record. Now he was suspended with the threat of expulsion, while the real troublemakers got away with barely a slap on the wrist. He thought about Lily and how scared she must have been. He thought about all the other times she'd probably been bullied and hadn't told him about it. His heart ached thinking about his little sister going through that alone. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his best friend, Tyler. "Dude, everyone's talking about what happened. Most people are on your side. Those guys are jerks, at least there was that." But it didn't change the fact that he was suspended and they weren't. The next morning, Jake woke up to the sound of voices downstairs. When he came down to the kitchen, his parents were huddled around his mom's phone, staring at the screen with wide eyes. "What's going on?" Jake asked. His mom looked up at him and there was something like hope in her eyes. "Lily posted something last night." "Posted what?" His dad turned the phone around so Jake could see. It was a video on social media. The preview image showed Lily in her wheelchair, tears on her face. Jake's stomach dropped. "What did she do?" "Just watch," his mom said. She pressed play. Lily's face filled the screen, and despite her tears, her eyes were determined. The video had captions because her speech was sometimes hard to understand, but her message came through loud and clear. She told the whole story. What the boys had done. How they'd mocked her and kicked her wheelchair. How Jake had protected her. How he was now suspended while the bullies faced no real consequences. She talked about how this wasn't the first time she'd been bullied and how the school never seemed to do anything real about it. "My brother is my hero," the captions read as Lily spoke. "He shouldn't be punished for protecting me. He should be thanked. If the school won't do the right thing, maybe everyone else can help us." The video ended with Lily wiping her tears and looking directly at the camera with an expression that was both vulnerable and fierce. Jake looked at his parents. "When did she post this?" "Around midnight," his mom said. "She must have recorded it after we all went to bed." "How many people have seen it?" His dad checked the phone. His eyebrows shot up. According to this, over 50,000 views and counting. Jake's heart started racing. 50,000 people. That was more than lived in their entire town. "Is that good?" he asked. His mom smiled for the first time since yesterday. "I think it might be very good." By noon, Lily's video had exploded across the internet. What started with 50,000 views had jumped to 200,000, then 500,000. Jake watched the numbers climb on his phone, barely able to believe what he was seeing. The comments section was overwhelming. Thousands of people were sharing their own stories of being bullied, or having disabled family members who faced similar treatment. Parents were tagging their local news stations. Teachers from other schools were commenting about zero-tolerance policies that punished victims instead of bullies. "This is heartbreaking." "That poor girl," one comment read. "I was that kid in the wheelchair. Thank God I had a brother like Jake," said another. "Where is this school? They need to be held accountable," demanded a third. But it wasn't just sympathy. People were angry. Really angry. And they were starting to do something about it. Jake's mom's phone rang. It was a reporter from Channel 7 News, one of the stations they'd called the day before. Suddenly, they were very interested in the story. Within an hour, a news van was parked outside their house. A reporter named Christine Alvarez stood in their living room with a cameraman, asking Jake and Lily questions about what happened. Jake told the story again, and this time someone was actually listening. Really listening. Christine's face grew more serious as he described the bullying and the aftermath. Then it was Lily's turn. She used her tablet to communicate, and Christine waited patiently for each message, never rushing her or making her feel uncomfortable. The cameraman filmed it all. "What do you want people to know?" Christine asked Lily gently. Lily typed carefully, and the computer voice spoke. "Bullying hurts. Not just disabled kids, all kids. And schools need to protect us better. They need to punish the bullies, not the people who defend us." Christine nodded. "That's very well said, Lily. Thank you for being so brave." After the interview, Christine pulled Jake's parents aside. "I want you to know this story is going to air tonight on the evening news. And based on what I'm seeing online, other outlets are going to pick it up too. Your family is about to get a lot of attention. Is that a good thing?" Jake's dad asked. Christine considered the question. It can be. Public pressure often creates change, but it can also be overwhelming. Just be prepared. She wasn't kidding about the attention. By that evening, Lily's video had over 1 million views. The hashtag #JusticeForJake was trending on social media. People were sharing photos of themselves with signs, supporting Jake and Lily. Disability advocacy groups were reposting the video, with messages about the importance of protecting vulnerable students. The story aired on Channel 7 at 6 o'clock. Jake and his family gathered around the TV to watch. Seeing himself on the news felt surreal, like he was watching someone else's life. But the segment didn't just focus on their family. Christine had done research. She'd found other families in the district who had similar stories about the zero-tolerance policy being used unfairly. One mother talked about her son being suspended for defending himself from a bully who'd been tormenting him for months. Another father described how his daughter was punished for pushing away a boy who wouldn't stop touching her inappropriately. The pattern was clear. The policy wasn't protecting students. It was protecting the school from having to make difficult decisions about who was really at fault. The segment ended with Christine standing outside Lincoln Middle School. We reached out to Principal Henderson and the school district for comment, but they declined to be interviewed. In a written statement, they said they cannot discuss individual student disciplinary matters due to privacy laws. But as this video continues to spread and this story gains national attention, many are asking, is this the kind of message we want to send to students? That defending someone who's being bullied is punishable by suspension? Jake's phone started buzzing nonstop. Friends from school were texting him. Kids he barely knew were reaching out with messages of support. Even some teachers sent messages, though they were careful about what they said since they still worked for the district. Tyler texted, "Dude, you're famous. Everyone at school is talking about this. A bunch of parents are freaking out." Another classmate wrote, "My mom is so mad about what happened to you. She's going to the school board meeting next week." The attention was overwhelming, but Jake had to admit it felt good to have people finally understanding what really happened. He wasn't some troublemaker. He was just a brother protecting his sister. But not everyone was supportive. Some people online criticized Lily for using her disability for sympathy. Others said Jake should have found a teacher instead of taking matters into his own hands, echoing what Principal Henderson had said. A few accused the family of making everything up for attention. Those comments hurt, but they were drowned out by the thousands of supportive messages. The next day, something unexpected happened. Parents started organizing. A woman named Patricia Chen, whose daughter had been bullied at Lincoln Middle School 2 years earlier, created a Facebook group called Parents Against Unfair School Policies. Within 24 hours, over 500 parents had joined. They shared their own stories. They posted about times their kids had been bullied and the school did nothing. They talked about the fear their children felt going to school every day. They discussed how the zero-tolerance policy seemed to punish kids who stood up for themselves while actual bullies faced minimal consequences, and then they decided to do something about it. Patricia organized a peaceful protest outside Lincoln Middle School for Friday morning. She called it "Stand Up for Students Who Stand Up." The idea was simple. Parents, students, and community members would gather with signs showing support for fair treatment and better anti-bullying policies. Jake's mom showed him the event page. Over 2,000 people had marked themselves as going. 2,000 people? Jake couldn't believe it. "For me? Not just for you," his mom said. "For every kid who's been treated unfairly by policies that don't make sense." You and Lily became the face of something that's been bothering parents for a long time. Friday morning arrived, and Jake's family drove to the school. Even though Jake was suspended, they wanted to see the protest. As they turned onto the street where the school was located, Jake's jaw dropped. The street was packed with people, way more than 2,000. They filled the sidewalks, spilled into the parking lot, and lined the front of the school. Many held signs, "Protect all students, zero tolerance for bullying, not for defenders." Jake did the right thing. Listened to Lily. There were news vans from multiple stations. Reporters were interviewing parents in the crowd. Someone had set up a table with free coffee and donuts. It looked less like a protest and more like a community gathering. But the message was clear. The school district was going to have to pay attention. Jake spotted some of his teachers in the crowd, holding signs despite the risk of upsetting their employer. Mrs. Roberts, his English teacher, had a sign that said, "Teachers stand with Jake." Mr. Kim from science was there too, along with several others. When people in the crowd noticed Jake and Lily, they started applauding. The sound built until it felt like everyone was clapping. Some people were crying. Others chanted, "Jake! Lily! Jake! Lily!" Jake felt his own eyes getting watery. He'd never felt so supported in his entire life. Patricia Chen made her way through the crowd to them. She was a small woman with fierce eyes and a determined expression. "Thank you for being here," she said, shaking hands with Jake's parents. She knelt down to be at eye level with Lily. "You're very brave." "Sweetheart?" Lily smiled and typed on her tablet. "Thank you for doing this." "We should have done it a long time ago," Patricia said, standing back up. "Your story just finally gave everyone the push they needed." A woman with a microphone approached them. She introduced herself as a reporter from a national news network. "Would you be willing to do an interview?" she asked. Before Jake's parents could respond, a commotion near the school entrance drew everyone's attention. Principal Henderson had come outside, along with Vice Principal Patterson and a few other administrators. They stood on the front steps looking at the massive crowd with expressions ranging from uncomfortable to alarmed. Principal Henderson held up his hands. "I understand you're all concerned, but this protest is disrupting the school day. I'm going to have to ask you all to disperse, and this is a public sidewalk," someone in the crowd shouted. "We have a right to be here. We're not leaving until you fix your broken policies," another person yelled. Patricia stepped forward, speaking into a bullhorn someone had handed her. "Principal Henderson, we're here peacefully. We're not disrupting anything. We just want you to know that the community is watching, and we demand better treatment for our children." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Principal Henderson's face reddened. "I cannot discuss individual student matters in a public forum." "Then discuss the policy," Patricia shot back. "Explain to us how a zero-tolerance policy that punishes kids for defending themselves makes any sense. Explain how bullies get a warning while their victims get suspended." More cheers from the crowd. "I'll be happy to discuss this at the appropriate time and place," Principal Henderson said stiffly. "But right now you're all trespassing on school property." "We're on the sidewalk." Multiple people shouted at once. A police car pulled up and 2 officers got out. Jake's stomach clenched. Were they going to arrest people? But the officers didn't look aggressive. They walked over to Principal Henderson and had a brief conversation. One of them shook his head and gestured to the crowd. The other one shrugged. Finally, one officer turned to the crowd and spoke into his radio, which was connected to a speaker on his car. "Folks, as long as you remain on public property and keep the protest peaceful, you have the right to be here. Just please make sure you're not blocking any driveways or emergency access." The crowd cheered again. Principal Henderson looked like he'd swallowed something sour. He turned and went back into the school, the other administrators following him. The protest continued for the rest of the school day. Parents took turns speaking into the bullhorn, sharing their stories. Disability advocates talked about the importance of protecting vulnerable students. Even some students who'd snuck out of class came to join, though the officers gently encouraged them to go back to school. By the time it was over, the message was clear. The community wasn't going to let this go. They wanted change, and they wanted it now. That evening, Jake's dad got a phone call from the superintendent's office. They wanted to schedule a meeting with the family. When Jake's dad asked what the meeting was about, the secretary simply said, "The superintendent feels it would be beneficial to discuss recent events." Jake's mom raised her eyebrows when she heard. Recent events. That's one way to put it. "Do you think they're going to overturn the suspension?" Jake asked hopefully. His parents exchanged glances. "I don't know," his mom said, "but at least they're finally paying attention." The meeting with the superintendent was scheduled for Monday morning at the district office. Jake had spent the entire weekend anxious about what would happen. His stomach was in knots, and he barely slept Sunday night. But something else was happening behind the scenes that Jake and his family didn't know about. Yet the school board had been receiving hundreds of emails and phone calls every day since the story broke. Board members couldn't go to the grocery store without being stopped by angry parents. Their social media accounts were flooded with messages demanding accountability. The pressure was becoming impossible to ignore. On Sunday evening, the school board held an emergency meeting. Patricia Chen and several other parent advocates managed to get themselves added to the agenda. They came prepared with printed copies of Lily's video transcript, testimonials from other families, and documentation of bullying incidents that had been improperly handled over the past 3 years. One board member, Richard Brooks, had been particularly vocal about reviewing the situation. He had a nephew with autism who attended a different school in the district, and Lily's story had hit close to home for him. "We need an independent investigation," he said during the meeting. "Not an internal review, but a real investigation by someone outside the district who can look at this objectively." Some board members resisted, worried about the cost and the bad publicity. But Patricia stood up during the public comment period and said something that changed the conversation. "With all due respect, you already have bad publicity. The question is whether you're going to do something about it or just hope it goes away, because I promise you it's not going away, not until there's real accountability and real change." The board voted 4-3 to launch an independent investigation into both Jake's suspension and the school's overall handling of bullying incidents. They hired an educational consultant named Dr. Michelle Foster, who had 30 years of experience reviewing school policies and investigating discrimination claims. Jake's family learned about the investigation Monday morning when they arrived at the district office. Superintendent Walsh, a tired-looking man in his 60s, explained what was happening. "The board has authorized a comprehensive review," he said, sitting across from Jake's family in a conference room. "Dr. Foster will be examining not just Jake's case, but the broader implementation of our policies, particularly as they relate to students with disabilities." "Does this mean Jake's suspension is being reconsidered?" Jake's mom asked. "It means everything is being reconsidered," the superintendent said carefully. "I can't make any promises about outcomes, but I want you to know that we're taking this seriously." Jake's dad leaned forward. "With respect, sir, you should have taken it seriously when it happened. Or when we first contacted the school about Lily being bullied, or any of the dozens of times we've raised concerns. It shouldn't have taken a viral video and a protest to get your attention." Superintendent Walsh had the decency to look uncomfortable. "You're right. And that's exactly what this investigation will address." Dr. Foster started her work that same day. She was a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She began by requesting access to all security camera footage from the hallway where the incident occurred. When Principal Henderson tried to claim there were no cameras in that area, Dr. Foster pulled up the school's own safety documentation showing camera placements. There were 3 cameras that had clear views of the water fountains where Lily had been bullied. "I'll need all footage from those cameras for the day in question," she said firmly. "And while we're at it, I'll need footage from the past 6 months. Principal Henderson's face went pale. 6 months? That's a lot of footage. Then I suggest you start gathering it." The footage told a damning story. Dr. Foster watched the video from the day of the incident first. It showed exactly what Jake had described. The 3 boys surrounding Lily, mocking her, and one of them kicking her wheelchair. It showed Jake's intervention and the push. But it also showed something else. 2 teachers had walked past while the bullying was happening. They'd glanced at the situation and kept walking. Dr. Foster made a note and continued watching. The footage from previous months was even more disturbing. Lily had been targeted repeatedly in that same hallway. Sometimes it was verbal harassment. Other times, students would intentionally bump into her wheelchair or block her path. Once, someone had put a trash can in front of her, forcing her to ask for help to move it while other students laughed. In nearly every instance, adults were either nearby or walked past without intervening. Dr. Foster interviewed over 40 people: students, teachers, staff members, and administrators. She created a safe way for students to share information anonymously, which opened the floodgates. One student wrote, "Those 3 guys have been bullying kids for years. Everyone knows it. Teachers know it, but nothing ever happens to them because one of them is related to someone important." That comment caught Dr. Foster's attention. She dug deeper and discovered that Dylan, the tall boy who'd kicked Lily's wheelchair, was the nephew of school board member Thomas Wright. Wright had been on the board for 8 years and wielded considerable influence. She interviewed Wright, who insisted he'd never interfered with any disciplinary decisions regarding his nephew. But when Dr. Foster cross-referenced Dylan's disciplinary file with other students who'd been in similar situations, the pattern was clear. Dylan had been reported for bullying or aggressive behavior 7 times in the past year. Each time he'd received minimal consequences, a verbal warning, a lunch detention, a stern talk. Meanwhile, other students with similar or lesser infractions had received much harsher punishments, including suspensions. Dr. Foster's investigation expanded to the special education department. She met with Mrs. Hendricks, who coordinated services for students with disabilities. The conversation was eye-opening. "I've filed numerous reports about Lily being harassed," Mrs. Hendricks said, her voice shaking with frustration. "I've documented every incident she's told me about. I've sent emails to administration, but nothing ever seemed to happen." "Do you still have copies of those reports?" Dr. Foster asked. "Every single one." Mrs. Hendricks pulled out a thick folder. Inside were detailed incident reports, emails, and even notes from meetings with Lily's parents. Dr. Foster flipped through them, her expression growing more severe with each page. "There are at least 15 documented incidents here spanning 2 years. What happened after you filed these?" "Usually nothing," Mrs. Hendricks said. "Sometimes I'd get an email back saying they'd look into it or speak with the students involved. But I never saw any real consequences. And Lily kept getting harassed." "Did you ever escalate this to the district level?" Mrs. Hendricks looked down at her hands. "I tried once about a year ago. I was told to follow the chain of command and work with the building principal. When I persisted, I was reminded that I was still in my probationary period and that I should focus on doing my job." Dr. Foster's jaw tightened. "That sounds like intimidation." "It felt like it," Mrs. Hendricks admitted quietly. The investigation continued for 2 weeks. Dr. Foster interviewed Jake's family multiple times, always treating them with respect and actually listening to what they said. She interviewed the 3 boys who'd bullied Lily, and their stories didn't match up. When confronted with the video evidence, they admitted to maybe being a little mean, but insisted it was just joking around. She also discovered something that made the whole situation even worse. The zero-tolerance policy that Principal Henderson had cited so rigidly wasn't actually as inflexible as he'd claimed. The policy included language about considering context and circumstances. It specifically mentioned that self-defense and defense of others could be mitigating factors. In other words, Principal Henderson could have taken Jake's situation into account. He'd chosen not to. When Dr. Foster asked him about this during an interview, he claimed he'd been advised by the district's legal counsel to apply the policy strictly to avoid discrimination lawsuits. But when Dr. Foster spoke with the district's legal counsel, the lawyer looked confused. "I never gave that advice," she said. "In fact, I've repeatedly told principals that they need to evaluate each situation individually. That's the whole point of having administrators, to use their judgment." By the end of the 2nd week, Dr. Foster had compiled a report that was over 50 pages long. The findings were devastating for the school's administration. She found that Lincoln Middle School had a systemic problem with bullying that disproportionately affected students with disabilities. She found that disciplinary actions were inconsistently applied, with students connected to influential families receiving preferential treatment. She found that staff members who tried to advocate for vulnerable students faced subtle retaliation. And she found that Principal Henderson had misapplied the zero-tolerance policy in Jake's case. But Dr. Foster didn't just identify problems. She made recommendations. Comprehensive anti-bullying training for all staff. A new reporting system where concerns about vulnerable students would go directly to the district level, not just building administrators. Regular audits of disciplinary records to identify patterns of unfair treatment, and specific protections for students with disabilities, including designated advocates who would check in with them regularly. The school board scheduled a special meeting to review the findings. They announced it would be open to the public, and the community room at the district office filled up fast. Jake and his family arrived early to get seats. Patricia Chen was there with dozens of other parents from her advocacy group. Local news cameras lined the back wall. Even some state legislators had shown up, concerned about what the investigation might reveal about educational policies more broadly. The board members filed in, looking solemn. Richard Brooks carried a copy of Dr. Foster's report that was marked up with sticky notes and highlights. Board President Angela Martinez called the meeting to order. "We're here tonight to discuss the findings of the independent investigation into recent events at Lincoln Middle School. Dr. Foster, would you please present your findings?" Dr. Foster stood at the podium, her report in hand. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She laid out the evidence systematically. The video footage, the disciplinary records, the ignored complaints, the preferential treatment, everything. The room was completely silent as she spoke. Some people looked angry. Others looked heartbroken. Thomas Wright, the board member whose nephew was one of the bullies, stared at the table and said nothing. When Dr. Foster finished, she looked directly at Jake and Lily. "I want to say something to this young man and his sister. Jake, you did what any decent person would do. You protected someone who needed help. The fact that you were punished for that is a failure of the adults in charge, not a reflection on you. And Lily, your courage in sharing your story has helped shine a light on problems that have hurt too many students for too long. You both deserve better." Jake felt tears prickling at his eyes. His mom reached over and squeezed his hand. Board President Martinez spoke next. "Thank you, Dr. Foster. We'll now open the floor for public comment." What followed were 2 hours of parents, teachers, students, and community members sharing their thoughts. Some were angry. Some were sad. But everyone agreed on one thing. Change needed to happen, and it needed to happen now. The school board deliberated for 3 hours behind closed doors after public comments ended. Jake and his family waited in the community room with dozens of other people who refused to leave until they heard the outcome. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, at nearly 11 o'clock at night, the board members filed back in. Board President Angela Martinez looked exhausted but determined. She took her seat at the front table and pulled the microphone closer. "Thank you all for your patience," she began. "What we've learned over the past 2 weeks has been deeply troubling. It's clear that we as a district have failed in our fundamental responsibility to keep all students safe and to treat them fairly." She paused, looking down at her notes before continuing. "After careful consideration of Dr. Foster's findings and extensive discussion among board members, we've reached several decisions." Jake's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. His mom gripped his hand tightly. "First," Martinez said, "we are immediately and fully overturning Jake Peterson's suspension. His disciplinary record will be cleared entirely, as if this incident never occurred. Jake, you acted to protect your sister from a clear threat. That should never have been punished." The room erupted in applause. Jake felt like he couldn't breathe. His dad pulled him into a tight hug while his mom started crying. Lily was clapping her hands together, tears streaming down her face. But Martinez wasn't finished. She waited for the room to quiet down before continuing. "Second, we are issuing a formal apology to both Jake and Lily Peterson and to their family for the way this situation was handled. You deserved better from us," more applause, though people were clearly waiting to hear what else would be said. "Third," Martinez continued, her voice growing firmer, "Principal Richard Henderson is being placed on immediate administrative leave pending further review. The investigation revealed serious concerns about his leadership and decision-making that go beyond this single incident." Gasps rippled through the room. Jake's eyes widened. He hadn't expected that. "Fourth, the 3 students involved in bullying Lily will face appropriate consequences. Due to privacy laws, I cannot discuss specific disciplinary actions, but I can tell you they will include suspension, mandatory counseling, and a clear message that bullying of any kind will not be tolerated in this district." Patricia Chen stood up and started clapping, and soon the entire room was on its feet applauding. Jake noticed that Thomas Wright, the board member whose nephew was one of the bullies, had his head down and wasn't clapping. When the applause died down, Martinez's expression became even more serious. Fifth, and this is perhaps the most difficult decision, Thomas Wright has submitted his resignation from the school board, effective immediately. Wright stood up without looking at anyone and walked out of the room. A few people whispered, but most remained silent, watching him leave. Sixth, Martinez continued, we are implementing every recommendation from Dr. Foster's report. This includes comprehensive anti-bullying training for all staff, a new reporting system with direct district oversight, regular audits of disciplinary records, and enhanced protections for students with disabilities. She took a deep breath before speaking again. But we want to do more than just implement recommendations. We want to make sure that what happened to Lily and Jake leads to lasting change that prevents this from happening to any other students. Martinez looked directly at Lily. With your family's permission, we would like to name our new anti-bullying initiative after you. Lily, We're calling it the Lily Peterson Protection Initiative. It will ensure that students with disabilities have dedicated advocates checking on their well-being regularly, that all reports of bullying are taken seriously and investigated thoroughly, and that students who stand up for others are recognized rather than punished. Lily's mouth fell open. She looked at her parents, who both had tears in their eyes and were nodding. She quickly typed on her tablet, and the computer voice rang out clearly in the quiet room. "Yes, thank you. I hope this helps other kids." The room exploded in the loudest applause yet. People were standing, cheering, crying. Jake watched his little sister, this brave 12-year-old who'd been through so much, sitting up straight in her wheelchair with a proud smile on her face. But Martinez still wasn't done. "Finally, there's one more thing we'd like to do tonight." She nodded to Richard Brooks, who stood up holding a plaque. "Jake Peterson," Brooks said, his voice thick with emotion. "Would you please come forward?" Jake looked at his parents uncertainly. His mom nodded, so he stood up on shaky legs and walked to the front of the room. Lily wheeled herself up next to him. Brooks held up the plaque so everyone could see it. "This is the Community Courage Award, which is given to individuals who demonstrate exceptional bravery and integrity in service of others. Jake, on behalf of the school board and this community, we want to recognize you for your courage in protecting your sister and for standing up for what's right, even when it meant facing consequences." He handed the plaque to Jake, who took it with trembling hands. The inscription read, "Presented to Jake Peterson for extraordinary courage and compassion in protecting his sister and demonstrating the true meaning of integrity. Your actions remind us all of the kind of character we should aspire to cultivate in our students. And Lily," Brooks continued, pulling out a second plaque, "this is for you. Your bravery in sharing your story has created change that will help countless other students. You've shown that one voice raised in truth can move mountains." Lily's plaque read, "Presented to Lily Peterson for remarkable courage in using her voice to advocate for justice and positive change. Your strength has inspired a community and will protect students for years to come." The standing ovation lasted for several minutes. Reporters were taking pictures. Parents were wiping their eyes. Even some of the board members were crying. When Jake and Lily finally returned to their seats, Jake felt like he was in a dream. Just 2 weeks ago, he'd been suspended and facing possible expulsion. Now he was being given a Courage Award. His sister had an anti-bullying initiative named after her, and real change was happening. The meeting finally ended around midnight. As people filed out, many stopped to shake hands with Jake's family or to tell them how grateful they were for their courage. Patricia Chen gave them all huge hugs. "You did this," she told Lily. "You changed everything." Lily typed back, "We all did it together." The next morning, Jake returned to Lincoln Middle School for the first time since his suspension. He was nervous about what to expect. Would kids treat him differently? Would teachers be weird around him? But when he walked through the front doors, something unexpected happened.